I'm here with Shannon Farrell. We got connected through Tim Kaufman, and she has a great story. Looking forward to chatting with her. She's actually lost 80 pounds herself. And first off, Shannon, thanks so much for taking the time. And maybe we could just start off with where you're from and a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Shannon. I live in Macomb Township, Michigan. I'm a cardiac rehab nurse for Beaumont Health. So I'm a registered nurse.
Awesome. It sounds like from your story that your weight loss came a lot later in life. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I've lost 80 pounds in the last about 3 years total. 40 were in the last 2 years. So, yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then earlier in life, at what point did the weight come on for you?
I was very athletic my whole life and very trim. I had a back injury. I blew L4 to 5 playing soccer. So I decided to try to treat it. I had 3 opinions. 2 told me I had to have surgery. The one doctor knew me very well and said, I know you're a knucklehead, so I think you can heal it on your own. So I actually went with him. And as my back improved, my overall health deteriorated very quickly. And so I began to have heart troubles, ended up in a wheelchair, took 26 medications, 3 different steroids, developed diabetes, lupus, Hashimoto's, thyroiditis. You name it, I had it. 3 steroids caused me to be diabetic and have triglycerides of 459. So I ended up in a wheelchair, 80 pounds heavier, and on 26 medications. And at one point I was given less than 5 years to live. So I had to decide myself what I was going to do about it. So I started searching for the answers, better doctors, and I didn't want my kids to go through what I went through as a child. So it was important for me to get healthy and well. So here I am.
Wow, that's a lot of information.
Yes.
And sounds like you went through a lot. Can you talk about, it sounds like you were fit, and we're not used to having a lot of these issues, much less the weight on. What was that like ending up being overweight or being bigger when you were later in life, when you had basically lived most of your life not struggling with some of those things and not having that additional weight?
Yeah, well, I always had played soccer. I always grew up kind of knowing something was wrong with me. I spent a lot of time in hand clinics. I've broken every finger in my hands, every toe. I dislocated several joints, but it was always about getting back to sports because I had such a passion for soccer and sports in general. I have a collegiate roughing certification. I've coached at very high levels, played all throughout my 30s. I like the leagues and goal scoring. So this kind of hit me sudden, and I got very, very depressed and very anxiety ridden because as my health declined and doctors kind of started experimenting on me, trying to figure out what was wrong with me, I became a guinea pig. But over a while, you don't want anything to happen again, so you get very, very depressed and saddened of who I used to be. And then they're telling me that I'm never going to get back to that and more or less not be able to live. That's very, very depressing. So, yeah, it was devastating.
And when you look back, I know you had a lot of stuff going on, but specifically with the weight, are there any things that in particular that kind of stick out that really contributed to your weight gain during that time?
Yeah, so the overall inactivity, and as the doctors decided to try more therapies on me, medications that didn't work, all the different steroids, and they actually at one point convinced me to go off of my thyroid medication. So I gained 1 pound a day, every day for 31 days. So it was actually rapid weight gain. And, clothes stop fitting, and people look at you differently. And so the way you're like treated overall is pretty devastating because I wasn't really used to that. And I was very, very athletic and more tomboyish my whole life. So glamour wasn't a big issue, but just the way people treat you. And then I'm only 5 feet tall, and I wore the weight all up in front, so getting clothes to fit a petite size, and I looked like a weeble wobble. Getting clothes to fit me was impossible. But then you start having even more issues, knee issues, then the diabetes spun out of control. So it was just not good at all. It was not a fun place to be. So.
And I know you said that you kind of became a science experiment for doctors just throwing medicine at you, and you eventually ended up being on 26 medications.
Yes.
Looking back now, do you have any, kind of indication of times where things just went wrong or kind of went off the rails, or maybe why
yes.
you had that happen to you?
Yeah, I think what a lot of doctors, especially if you miff them a little bit, they just give you a diagnosis and they just want to treat symptoms. They don't want to know what caused it. So I kept saying, why is this happening to me? And they just would, I'd walk out of every appointment with 3 scripts, and they tried all different types of tests and procedures I had that were just needlessly done. I should have never been placed on a lot of medications that I was placed on. So it gets to be like, looking back on it now, I'm like, I can't believe they let me do that to me. But I was so, I just say poisoned by medication. You don't really understand what's going on. And so I just went with it. And there's actually chunks of my life in that whole mess. It was about a year that I don't remember. I look at pictures, I have no recollection of the event. That's devastating, to think you missed a year of your life. So.
Wow. And I think you also said that during that time you developed some autoimmune diseases. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I had developed quite a few. I had Hashimoto's thyroiditis, so my thyroid, in effect, ate itself. So I have no working thyroid anymore. I had a lot of bowel issues. I was diagnosed with lupus. I had vitiligo, so my skin started changing pigment to white. Rosacea, so I had severe cystic acne. And I actually was misdiagnosed with ALS, MS, so multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, and all of that. So they wanted to actually call me a lot of things, and actually is on the front of my chart at the hospital, but they've since taken that away. So I kept having to push as soon as I started feeling better to get a correct diagnosis. So it took me a long time to get that because I had very severe issues with autonomic dysfunction. So my heart rate sped out of control, my blood pressure dropped. At some points I had to wear a helmet because I would pass out a lot, and I had concussions, teeth knocked down. So I was a mess for a long time, but I ended up figuring out what I had on my own one night online and got myself to the cardiologist I see now. And he helped me put a lot of the pieces together and helped me get off a lot of the medications. So I did that, and then I started figuring out the diet part on my own, which is just incredible. It's been such a game changer for me.
Wow, you've certainly been through the ringer. I certainly want to get to kind of where things turn around for you, but one other thing I wanted to ask about is, which now that you've kind of gone through everything, unfortunately I can say I maybe can understand a little bit, but I know that you said the doctors gave you less than 5 years to live. What was that based off of, or what was the reasoning behind that kind of diagnosis or that?
Yeah, so I developed postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and I also have mast cell activation disorder. And in that round, they actually thought I had multiple system atrophy. So it's kind of like a Parkinson's, but it takes all the autonomic dysfunction. So kind of along the lines of ALS, but they had initially told me that I had that. They said if I didn't turn around in 6 months that I had that, and I had less than 5 years to live. Just because I couldn't digest food and all that. So I actually saw 3 neurologists, and the 2 other opinions I had that I did not have that, but I had severe autonomic dysfunction. So it was very shocking because I didn't want to be a young mom. I had young kids at the time. I didn't want to pass away and leave them, without a mom. So I sought out the top neurologists in the field, and they all said, no, you don't have that. But yeah, which is good that I had medical knowledge.
Yeah. So, so when did things begin to turn around? Did you have a point at which you decided, I've got to figure this out, I've got to change things, or was it more of a gradual thing? What kind of brought you through all of that?
Well, for me, all the doctors in this area kept asking me, requesting that I apply for disability. They really wanted me. Some of the doctors actually had called me a liability. And anyone that knows me knows that I'm a very laid-back person. I'm very sweet and kind to all the doctors, so I never was a problematic patient. I think it was kind of their way of like releasing me, but not. So I went and saw a disability attorney, and they pretty much said I had an open shut case, and they showed me what I would be making. And then what sits in is like, I don't want to be that person. I want to be functioning. I know that I got what it takes to get back. We would have had to have sold our house, our cars, our kids wouldn't have been able to play sports. So I was like, that's just not going to work for me. So I actually walked out of his office and I turned my back on all of that. And I said, there has to be some way for me to do it. And I started researching and therapies, treatment protocols of how to be able to walk again and walk successfully. And so I actually did some research about astronauts. When they actually come back into our system, they have to actually go through autonomic training again because they do develop severe dysautonomia after they return to the United States, to our planet. And so I started researching on Dr. Levine and his treatment protocols. And so I met with somebody in Michigan that was willing to help me, and I went through an intensive program of retraining. So leg retraining, walk retraining, core retraining, and progressed over time, and actually got back to work. I actually had met a nurse. I've been with Beaumont. It'll be 28 years in October, and a nurse friend of mine was running an OR unit, and she said, why don't you come back and just cover lunch hours for me? And I'm like, all right, great. So I started doing that and building up to return to work. So it started like clicking with me, and then I got the job in cardiac rehabilitation. And when I hired in there, I was in the picture in my before and after. It was 4 days before we saw our very first patient. And there I was, 80 pounds heavier, trying to teach people how to live better. And I was like, I don't know if anybody's going to listen to me. So I started making the connection and started removing things like artificial sweeteners. Then I went through the artificial colorants, the sugars. So I did kind of a step therapy. And then I went completely plant-based 2 years ago. So.
And then I know that you began researching your nutrition, and you started experimenting. What or how did you find those changes made on your symptoms and your conditions?
Well, yeah, I actually ended up finding out. I had done a lot of research about artificial sweeteners and knew that I just didn't feel right. And all I was actually doing was a little packet of Crystal Light and a big, huge thing of water. But I found that it actually stimulated me to eat. So I took those out in 7 days. I did 7 days. And I actually was getting very active by then. And I lost 7 pounds in 7 days. And I realized that I felt much better. And then the next thing I know, I had researched caramel coloring. And so I took that out. And everything I removed, I got better. I got better. And I called myself a flexitarian for a while. I would rarely eat meat. But here and there, just a little bit. But the very last product that I gave up was actually whey, and I didn't even realize that's what it was in protein bars. And before I actually gave that up, I actually was down to 5 foods that I actually could eat without having severe allergic reactions. I dropped the whey, and before I dropped the whey, I actually was diagnosed with a lectin allergy and a pectin allergy, so that took out all the fruit. So I hadn't had a piece of fruit in a year. I took out the whey, went raw, and it just was dramatic, my improvement. I had energy, I got off of my broom at work, I got creative, and I can eat my body weight in fruit now. So it's just so powerful what nutrition does for us, good nutrition. So.
Yeah, and I think I read that you reduced your medication, reduced your pain, and reversed several illnesses. What were some of the illnesses that you reversed, and maybe you can even talk about the medications that you were able to get off of or reduce it, and maybe the pain as well?
Yeah, so I actually, in all of that, was diagnosed with rosacea, and I was put on doxycycline. I have no signs of rosacea at all. I haven't taken doxycycline in about 18 months. Before I converted to whole food plant-based, I actually was diagnosed with lupus. I had several lupus flares. I was on Plaquenil for that, and a couple of different pain medications. I've never been able to really tolerate narcotics, so but like a Voltaren, it's an anti-inflammatory. I've gotten off of the Plaquenil because they had started to talk about biologics for me because it really started to attack my kidneys. I have no signs of lupus at all, none, and I've not had a flare in, I think, 8 months now. I don't take any medications for cholesterol or high triglycerides. I am not on any diabetic meds at all. Before all that, dropping all the way and going to whole food plant-based, I was taking, I think, 8 medications for allergies alone. I am down to just 2 right now, and just because of the cottonwoods flying around here. So yeah, I just take 2 thyroid medications. I do have to still take a beta blocker because my heart rates without being on a beta blocker go up to 190 when I'm running. So I really don't like that too much. So I just recently had to go actually back on it. So that doesn't feel great. And other than that, I really don't take just an allergy medicine here or there. My pain, I would get such severe pain in my joints because I actually ended up being diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos hypermobile. So I've dislocated the majority of my joints. So I have a skeletal age of about 68, and I'm 46. And I really rarely have pain now. It actually, if something's in pain, I'm like, what did I do? So yeah, which is just outstanding. I feel really great. Everybody will tell you in PBNSG that I found the plant-based fountain of youth. So they keep saying you're de-aging, which is amazing. So yeah.
Wow. Well, it sounds like life is a little bit simpler, more pain-free, and also it sounds like cheaper. I can't imagine all those meds, what that must have been like.
Yeah.
I think in our previous conversation, you mentioned to me about your dad, some of the health issues that he struggled with, many of which you believe could have been avoidable. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my dad at the age of 30 had a stroke. Actually, my mom had asked me, come on, we have to go to your work and get your dad. Something's wrong with him. And so, back then they really didn't have ambulances, so they dragged him out to the car. We took him to the hospital, and he said, I just went to the dentist because he had the facial drooping. And I'm like, no. And so he ended up being in the hospital, and he was diagnosed with having a stroke. And he ended up back in the hospital. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later, and he was diagnosed with a rare onset of type 1 diabetes. So he never produced insulin again. I remember when he was young, he actually did pretty well with it. He got into soccer refereeing and coaching, and that's how I got involved in soccer. So he's fairly active, and he actually ate fairly well. But as time progressed, his diet declined. And so he, had to have several toe amputations, repeated leg infections, numerous laser eye surgeries. He had issues with erectile dysfunction. He had angioplasty at 45. At 60, he had come up. So just overall declining, brain fog, terrible. So at 60, he had come up to see my brother graduate with his master's in teaching at Oakland University because he was living in Florida at the time. And I was his primary caregiver with the last few years of his life. And so he came to me on Mother's Day, the day after, and he says, I have this jaw pain and my tooth is killing me. And he was sweating. And I'm like, And then being a cardiac nurse, the majority of my time, I was like, that's not good. So I took him to the hospital. He ended up having to have triple bypass and didn't do very well after the surgery at all. Just, when you go on heart bypass, you're subclinical and you're actually like clinically dead. So there's little known research about brain fog after having bypass surgery, and he just had it all. So he did come home, and I think it was the 3 days. And I said to the surgeon that I knew very well, I said, he's not ready to go home. He's like, yes, he is, Shannon. I'm like, no, he's not. He goes, I discharged him already. So I took him home. We got home. I ended up having to take him back to the other hospital. He had a hemoglobin of 7.0 range. So he ended up, 5 weeks later, he did get to go. He ended up staying in the hospital 10 days. 5 weeks later, he went back home to Florida, where he passed the stress test to get into cardiac rehab and died 3 days later during Hurricane Wilma. And he had a major coronary event. But a lot of that was all preventable. I mean, to watch him decline, patients that I see every day, to see them declining and not really know it. But my dad was 100% preventable. He could have totally halted and managed his diabetes, and he should be alive today. I mean, thriving today. And so it's very sad. So he died suddenly. He's gone 11 years now, and he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. But I tried, I thought about him a lot when I was going through what I was going through, and I'm like, I don't want my kids to grow up with a sick parent. I want them to have a mom that's active in their lives and doing what I can to help others live. And so that's what my mission is. So.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing all that. So I know you're a nurse, and you said that your patients are getting younger and younger and worse and worse. Why do you think that is? Or is there any kind of patterns or any things that you're noticing that maybe surprise you that that really stick out?
Yeah, so my patients are getting much younger. As people get more away from cooking and eating whole foods, they are now gravitating towards fast food as a commonplace, and then like your local dollar stores sell, boxes of rice-a-roni or stuff for $1. So people, I had a lady say to me, I can actually take my son and eat it. I think it's Burger King has a 5 for $4 or 4 for $5 deal. I can take him and eat a full meal cheaper than I can cook a meal. That's devastating to me. And, some of my daughter's friends, the one family has a calendar on their refrigerator, and every night has a different place where they get carry out. So nobody's cooking anymore, and especially like the generation that's younger than me are just not cooking. And so they're having very high issues with diabetes, overweight, and just a general lack of knowledge with nutrition. So, it is a little bit lower socioeconomic class, but they're just not gaining the knowledge that they have. So any of the ones that are the youngsters told me that they do not cook at all in their home. and they have no nutritional knowledge at all. So it's very sad. We're just starting to see them. So they have no options. I mean, I'm getting patients that young that are having to have open heart surgery with 5 vessels done because of severe advanced diseases. That's very sad when you're 33 and have to have a bypass. I mean, where do you go from there? So.
Yeah, and I know that you're part of a group, a plant-based support group that you're involved with. I think you're kind of in charge of social media and things like that. And from the little bit of things that I've heard about it, it seems pretty unique in the structure and what all it's doing. I know Dave Willits, I think, is involved as well.
Yes.
Would you mind talking about that a little bit and kind of, what that does for the people who are in it that maybe otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity?
Yeah, so I'm involved with the Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group, or PBNSG. I actually found the group one day. I was in my cardiac rehab unit, and I had 2 patients that had a really hard time getting around their angina. They both had blockages in vessels that were not repairable. So they both were really great guys and very, very active before they had their heart events. So I said to them, you guys should go to that meeting. It's tonight. And they're like, well, you have to go, Shannon. And I'm like, I can't go. I'm flying to Florida in the morning. So the one went and flipped around his whole entire diet. When I came back from Florida, he had color in his face. He looked amazing. He was happy. He was smiling. And he was actually like walking on the treadmill for double the time he had done before. So he challenged me. He says, you got to do it now, Shannon. I'm like, okay, great. So I had called the director, Paul Chatlin, and I said, I'd like you to come and speak at our Guiding Hearts meeting. And Guiding Hearts is a support group that Beaumont runs for their heart patients, and I'm the moderator for that. And so I asked Paul to come, and he came, and he spoke to me the loudest. There was 30 people there, but he spoke to me the loudest, and I listened. So from that day forward, I got very involved with PBNSG. In their volunteer group. So I do run the small group division. So we take our large meetings, which average about 200 all the way up to 1,000 people, depending on our speakers. We then put people in their cities around the Metro Detroit area. So they have a small experience, which is great. So we share stories and recipes and a lot of laughter and sometimes boat rides. And the way I teach and moderate, we have to have fun. That's just me. So it's become amazing because as I heal others, I heal myself, which is great. And I see so many people, when you see people that didn't have hope before have a glimmer of hope, that to me is just the fuel that I need to keep going forward. And, you mostly have people come to plant-based nutrition through advanced disease states. But to see people get color again in their face and get hope. But we are starting to see, which is great. So I do run their Instagram and Twitter, and I really, really enjoy that. And I do a lot of community promotions. For both them and for Beaumont Health. So I'm just getting into that with community initiatives and community development, which is very exciting because they're very excited about plant-based nutrition. So that's amazing. That's what you want to happen. But it's great. I mean, we have groups all around the city, and I can't say enough about how those groups have impacted. Because when I went plant-based, I was the only one in my household that did it. I met a lot of resistance that was not fun to deal with at all. Actually caused a lot of issues. And eventually my daughter jumped ship with me. She saw as I got healthier that she wanted to get healthier. So it became a true house divided. So I try to really help our members that are having those same issues. And we get a lot of widowers and divorced men that don't cook. They've never cooked. And so I try to coach them on and cheer them on and meet with them at the grocery or let's go out to eat. And, so I really enjoy doing that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I'd love for you to kind of talk about, or, I think you're in a unique position because you're a nurse. I know you mentioned to me before I started recording that you kind of, it sounds like, get some of the patients as they're coming out of heart surgery and are kind of almost a caretaker or responsible for, caring for them immediately afterwards. What are you finding that for those patients, that a change in diet or a change in their eating protocol is making in their heart health?
Yeah, well, I get a lot of patients, even your older patients, even people that are very, very well educated, so you're talking masters, PhDs, doctors, don't have a basic knowledge of nutrition. So most doctors, and most people don't know this, can graduate from medical school with no nutritional training at all. Which is sad. And then most doctors have to see a patient every 6 minutes to break even for the day. So it gives a doctor very little chance to educate the patients. But when you finally get patients that are all in with plant-based, or actually, I coined the term plant curious, that are interested and maybe they're going to, devil their feet a little bit and let's just go. It's just amazing to watch people transform. They just get happier. And, as their medications get dropped, they get more excited. As they start learning more. The meeting that I held tonight was actually about food label reading, and most people don't know what's in their food. They don't know how our government works. It's just so eye-opening to them. But I've seen patients, the 2 patients that I had are actually progressed back. The one's doing half marathons, the other one's regularly running 10Ks. They just did a 60-mile bicycle ride together, no less, which was amazing. They both have just changed their lives dramatically in front of me. And it's just, to me, that's just so rewarding to watch people let go of the meds and have a whole nother life. They truly can have a whole nother happy life.
And just to clarify, these are people who capabilities were pretty limited and possibly could have never imagined doing some of these things before making the dietary and lifestyle changes. Is that right?
Yes, because a lot of them come to me very, very low endurance levels, and both of them grieved who they were before. So they, were both very athletic, and so very used to running marathons, half marathons, all these long distance bicycling. So when heart disease comes a knocking, it came suddenly for both of them. And so then when they were rehabilitating, they kept getting caught by those little teeny arteries that had the microvascular disease, and just were overwhelmed by angina or chest pain. And so to see them now, they're just such different people. It's just amazing. They are very advanced athletes now, and doing very, very well.
And normally a lot of these questions are kind of asked towards somebody, in particular in their stories, but it's not super often that I get a chance to chat with somebody who's actually in the medical profession and has gone through everything you have. And I know that heart disease is something that, whether it's, somebody immediately next to us or a close friend, it affects basically everyone.
Yeah.
Are you finding that for the most part, or for maybe you can even speak to, I don't know if there's any kind of ratio or percentage, that for the patients that you see who previously had major heart events or had issues going on, are you finding that most of them that kind of stick with maybe this type of program or stick with these dietary changes are able to basically come out of the other side and kind of, I hate to use the word reverse, but in terms of, can you kind of elaborate on the actual medical effects that you're finding for these patients?
Yeah, I actually, working in healthcare as long as I have, I can tell very quickly who's going to change and who's not going to change. So I kind of focus it down. So I actually developed my own questionnaire about barriers for change and barriers for nutrition. So whether it's a, psychosocial aspect, or it's a monetary or lack of education. So then I kind of work on that. But I always leave my door open for patients to come back. So I have to say the percentage from the get-go is low, because a lot of people, what happens in the hospital is you go in the hospital and let's say you had a heart attack, and then they're taking you for the cardiac catheterization, and then, oh yeah, you need bypass. So they're given very little time to digest that. So they wake up, the next couple of days, and they just had bypass. And the next maybe like month, they're kind of like doped up on pain medication. They had blood loss during the surgery. So it hasn't hit them yet. And that's kind of when the post-traumatic stress disorder, it's very little understood in that, but I'm seeing that a lot more with patients because it's such a rapid transition system. So they actually get out and they're about 6 weeks in and their families have gone back to work, and here they are, they had this problem that they haven't acknowledged yet. So I have to actually help them get over that, and then we start to plant the seeds of nutrition. I have had actually 5 people in the last month alone that actually were out of my program for 1 year that came back and told me they were ready to do it. That they were ready to listen, they were ready to do it. And so how that comes about is usually they don't want to make any changes in their household because they don't want to upset their spouse or their family. So they just keep doing what they're doing, and they realize they start to feel poor again, and they start to have chest pain, or they have other issues with blood pressure. And so a lot of them just wake up and they're like, you know what, no, I have to take control of my life, and I have to get back to wellness. And then I have had actually a couple of wives come back in and say, you have to call so-and-so because he's just not cutting it and he's a mess. And so the wives will come in and I'll meet with them for a couple of hours. I actually had a wife today. And I was like, yep, I'll help. I'm all in. And so, yeah, the percentage of switching over to Plant Perfect is low, but the percentage of switching to plant-based or plant-curious is higher, I would say. I think about 40%.
And what are the effects that you're seeing on those patients, like in medical terms? Obviously, I know that there are some things that once you decide to make changes in your life that will happen socially and emotionally and things like that. But as far as the actual the changes in how their body is as a result, what are you finding that results like?
So yeah, most of the patients, their lipids, so their cholesterol will drop, and their triglycerides a lot, which is a component of that. You'll get actually a pretty quick reduction in blood sugar. So the hemoglobin A1C, which measures your hemoglobin, your glucose over the course of 2 to 3 months. We get some patients in the hospital that have average blood sugars of 400s even, which is just devastating. Not only that, but weight loss, which is great, and that's just such an amazing sign. Their blood pressures will dramatically drop because as they get away from the processed foods and all the sodium intake, their blood pressures will dramatically lower. Not only that, but one of the main things is depression. A lot of them don't realize that how much the food or the weight contributes to depression. But I've just had so many people have such significant reductions in depression, which is just amazing. And so I really try to get them even more active in their own healthcare to help them gain more advantage of that. But yeah, I've just seen so many great effects of the plant-based nutrition and their overall, their labs and their blood pressures. It's very evident very quickly. So we'll get people that can reduce their medications very, very quick. So, which is great.
Yeah, and you mentioned in there that you've kind of developed your own questionnaire, and you can kind of sounds like you almost have a sixth sense of who's going to change and who's not. What you don't have to necessarily go through what exactly the questionnaire asks, but I am a little curious in terms of if there are things that you notice within all the people you've seen that either help them to change or indicators that they are ready to change or they're willing to change. Are there any kind of patterns in there?
Yeah, so I ask a lot of patients, like today we asked in the first teaching that I did, I was like, how many of us could not get up from the table until you finished your plate? And it was interesting, it was an older group of people, they all raised their hands. We all had to sit there. So a lot of people don't realize like nutrition gets routed in your childhood, and it's a very personal journey. So if people have traumatic instances in their childhood with nutrition, they kind of get frozen in that spot. So then it becomes kind of an overeating. So I definitely see a lot of people that use food as a drug or a coping mechanism. So if they answer it like in the question about, how did your mom cook, did your dad cook, and then I ask them if you cook. When's the last time you ate just from plants, no packages? So they have to go through the system of that. And then I will always ask them, like, what are you snacking on in front of the computer? What are you snacking on before you go to bed? What are you eating before the TV? Do you sit at a table? So it actually really sets up where I can go with that. And so patients that truly have addictive food issues, then I will send them for treatment. So I've even meeting patients at Overeaters Anonymous, taking off pounds sensibly. I'll go with wherever a patient wants me to go to meet them there. So they're safe and they have a good environment. And so if patients truly have addictive food issues, then we will get them the help that they need with a dietitian. But we do have a diabetes educator in Michigan. Her name is Carolyn Trapp, and she works with PCRM. She's all plant-based. That's all she teaches. And so a lot of the diabetics, I will get to her. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people, if it's a socioeconomic thing where they just can't financially afford food, I have some systems set up with food pantries that try to give them as whole foods as possible. And then we are in the process of setting up some cooking demonstrations and some cooking classes for patients that will debut in January. Not only that, like one of my main things is eventually I'd like to get on the wellness side, but I'm very concerned about the children that are being raised in this current age, and they're being trained to not know where their food comes from and to just eat out all the time. So no cooking, no nothing. And so I actually have pitched an initiative to get kids an educator and some type of gardening system into their schools, especially in our low socioeconomic districts, to help them learn about food. And it's all going to be plant-based. So I'm actually very, very excited about that.
Awesome. Well, I could continue to ask medical questions till the cows come home, because this is certainly a education for me in some aspects. But I know at one point you were in a wheelchair, you had on 26 medications, all this kind of stuff. Sounds like things are a lot different now. So what do you enjoy doing now activity-wise? How is life different for you now since those days?
Yeah, so now I work full-time. I'm usually never home in the evening. I'm usually at a PBNSG event, a PBNSG small group. I'm training for a half marathon, the Detroit Free Press Marathon. I'll run that October the 16th, I believe. I'm training with Girls on the Run. So it's a girls running group, running, training, coaching. They teach girls about their body image, empowerment. We just teach them about nutrition and physical fitness. So I'm going to debut as a coach for them in September. So I do a lot of mileage trying to get up. I actually teach all forms of fitness. So I'm a very hands-on teacher in cardiac rehab. I'm the only nurse. I'm only one of 2 employees there. So I actually get up on the treadmill. I teach them bar routines, resistance training. I'm very active. I used to coach soccer a lot. I actually am moving on a different path because my daughter's going to Michigan State. So I'm very active in my kids' lives. And then I am doing community promotions for Beaumont starting on Saturday. So I'll be at the local farmers markets, and I'll be teaching patients about Beaumont services and about plant-based nutrition. So it's very exciting. They picked me to do that. So, and I'm writing some wellness initiatives. So I do actually a lot with employee wellness. We have a walking group. We're starting a plant-based diet challenge in September. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm very active. So
yeah, what a incredible distance you've come from not remembering a year of your life to making me dizzy with every single thing that you have going on.
Yes, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, what would you say to someone who's at the beginning of this journey, who's maybe, sick and tired of being sick and tired, they're looking to make changes in their life, trying to maybe lose weight, and get started on that path? What advice would you give that person?
I just had a nurse, so she inboxed me in Facebook today too, and we worked together in the cardiac catheterization lab, and I think it was 2002. So I worked in the cardiac catheterization lab for a moment, and she has, you'll get people on your Facebook page that you don't think are and they're not liking anything. But people are really paying attention. So if anybody's questioning whether or not they should keep posting the stuff, please post it. There's people out there. So she ended up telling me that she's critically depressed. She needs some help. She's been watching all my posts. She's watched my transformation, and she desperately needs help. And she did send me the second message was that she knows that her husband won't do it. And I actually know her husband, and no, he will not. I would fall over dead if he did. But so she's very scared to navigate it, but she knows it's just so essential for her. And so I'll meet them someplace, and I tell them all my journey, and I give them every resource that I have possible. But I will coach them. I'll coach them through it. And I tell people I had every reason to not do it, but every reason to do it. So, and I always tell even the patients that come in or the members that come in, and they'll tell me that they cheated. Like the one guy said, I cheated on you with a Skittle. And I'm like, oh my God, a Skittle. But it's not, everybody thinks it's such a back step to cheat. And they just totally go off their diet path. So that's what most Americans do. Where I always tell people to see it as a side step. So you had that side step, so you realize how bad you felt when you cheated or whatever, or you deviated. Now let's use that knowledge to go forward. So yeah, so I actually set it up to meet with her this weekend. So she's going to come to the farmers market where I'm doing community promotions. So I will see what her barriers are, and then we'll plan a course of action. But there's hope for everybody in all of this. I mean, even if, someone can transition to one day with no animal products, and then they realize how much better they feel as they start to eliminate. So, yeah, I mean, and then people start to say, hey, I felt better yesterday. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try it again today. And so, and then I will say, you have this amazing support group system here with some of my closest friends ever that I've met in the last 2 years come with me. And so I'll take them to every single small group with me. I'll bring them to meetings. I'll pay for their way. But yeah, just if you can give someone hope, I can't email everybody every day, but I can try, once a week I have people on a schedule when I call them, and I'll tell them, call me at 6:15 in the morning. I get into my car to drive to work, or call me at about 4:45. And so most days I usually have someone that'll call me and say, just tell me something good or something positive. And usually I'm a jokester. I have a quick wit, and we usually end up laughing, and that's all a lot of people need. They just need to know someone cares out there. So I'm hoping that I'm that person for some people. So
that's awesome. And then, if you could go back in time and, the person that was in a wheelchair being misdiagnosed, weighing 80 pounds more than you do now, and give that person some advice that maybe could have gotten things going a little bit earlier. I know yours is a little different than for maybe some people, but is there anything that you would go back in time and tell that person as some encouragement?
Yeah, I mean, when you're like that ill and, I was having the gaps in that, I would have told myself to push harder to get answers. So I let a lot of doctors just say I had X and put it in my chart and then start treating me, but they didn't have definitive answers. So I ended up being on a lot of medications that I should have never been placed on. And I would have pushed harder for more wellness. And I never ate bad at all in any of that, which is so shocking because I gained all that weight. But yeah, I did eat a couple of things I shouldn't eat, but I would, definitely tell myself to have a little bit more of a backbone. Now, that's what I teach people, is not only to eat correctly, but to be their own advocate in their own health care. Because so many people, especially the older generation, they see the doctors as godlike. They're people. They're humans. They make mistakes. They eat. They go to the bathroom. They trip on the sidewalks. They're doctors. They're just a man and a woman, So trying to coach people into getting their own advocacy, their own healthcare is just a great thing to do, because most people just, take the pill, and I don't realize that, a pill is making the body do something that it shouldn't be doing. And so many people are just like, pill. But yeah, I would definitely say to myself, say no, because I was flatlined twice and all of that. I was cardioverted and defibrillated. So I was clinically dead twice, and needlessly. So that's not going to happen again. So, yeah, you live and you learn, though.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're still around to advocate, obviously, for yourself to get to this point, but obviously it sounds like you're a huge advocate for others. If people want to reach out to you and connect or find out more about what you're doing, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So they can find me at Shannon at PBNSG. So Shannon at PBNSG. So that's a plant-based nutrition support group. I'm on their website under the Who's Who section, and I do run their small group. So you can send me an email through that system, or you can click on to sign me up, and you'll get an email. So yeah, I have I think 8 emails right now. But yeah, everybody's very important to me. So I've had people reach out to me all over the world, which to me is just amazing. I just spoke with someone from New Zealand a couple of days ago. So yeah, if people need help, I want to get them the help that they need. I actually went to Mexico recently, traveled, did the whole food plant-based. It was amazing. It was a great experience. You can do it. I'll tell you how to do it. But yeah, I got into Mexico with my passport, and I hadn't updated my passport. They almost refused to let me into Mexico because I don't look anything at all like my passport. So I had to argue with the Mexican officials, let me into Mexico. Because yeah, it's life-changing when you lose the weight. And so yeah, now when people tell me, oh, you look so healthy and vital, and you look beautiful, and all this, I'm always like, what are they talking about? And then, it's getting easier now for me to hear people say that. But you're like, okay, because most people put up the barrier, I call it the heavy wall or the fat wall, that they get defensive with being so heavy. And I was like that, because people would say, are you pregnant, or what's the matter with you? And yeah, it's amazing what people say to you when you're sick and when you're very overweight. They're like, why don't you just get a new heart? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go buy one, because I had such issues with heart failure during all that. I'm like, yeah, I'll just go pick one up at Rite Aid, So yeah, it's amazing what people will say to you.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for the wealth of information and education. I feel like my head was spinning from all the terminology. I need to go get a medical dictionary or something to backtrack through this. But thanks for all the advocacy. Thanks for what you're doing and for spreading the message and for sharing your message. And we'll look forward to chatting with you soon.
Yes.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. All right. You too.
Bye-bye.